You're lying in bed, the day is over, there's nothing left to do, but your mind is still running, replaying that conversation from this afternoon, analyzing the tone in someone's text, planning tomorrow's tasks, building scenarios for things that might never happen. You're exhausted, you want to sleep, but your brain won't stop. This isn't an occasional worry, this is constant overthinking. And it's not happening because you're anxious by nature or because you lack discipline. It's happening because your mind believes that thinking more will keep you safer. That if you can just figure everything out in advance, you can prevent bad outcomes. That uncertainty is more dangerous than exhaustion, and that belief is costing you everything. Overthinking doesn't start when you notice it. It starts hours earlier, sometimes days earlier. It's the background process running beneath every interaction, every decision, every moment of your day. You're not choosing to overthink. You're just becoming aware of something your mind has been doing all along. There's a woman who can't make simple decisions without spiraling. What to order at a restaurant becomes a 10-minute internal debate. What to wear becomes a morning of trying on different outfits and imagining how each one might be perceived. What to say in an email becomes an hour of drafting, deleting, rewriting. She's not indecisive, she's terrified of making the wrong choice, and her mind has convinced her that more thinking equals better outcomes, but it doesn't. More thinking just equals more exhaustion. This is the psychology behind overthinking. Your brain is trying to solve a problem that can't be solved through thinking alone. It's trying to eliminate uncertainty, to predict the future, to control outcomes that are fundamentally outside your control. And because these goals are impossible, the thinking never resolves, it just loops. Most people believe overthinking is about the content of the thoughts, that if you're replaying a conversation, the problem is the conversation, that if you're worried about someone's perception of you, the problem is that person, but that's not accurate. The content is just the vehicle, the real problem is the process, the way your mind has learned to respond to uncertainty with analysis instead of acceptance. You've probably noticed that overthinking doesn't happen when you're busy. It happens when you're trying to rest, when you're lying in bed, when you're in the shower, when you finally have a moment of quiet, and that's not a coincidence. Your mind uses stillness as an opportunity to process, to prepare, to make sure you haven't missed anything important. But somewhere along the way, that processing became compulsive. It stopped being productive and started rumination. The difference is simple. Processing moves you forward. Rumination keeps you stuck. There's a man who replays every conversation he has, not just the difficult ones, every single one. He analyzes what he said, how he said it, what the other person's reaction meant. He builds theories about whether they liked him, whether he came across well, whether he should have said something different. And by the time he's done analyzing one conversation, there's another one to dissect. The cycle never ends. This is rumination in its purest form. His mind isn't solving a problem, it's a rehearsal, playing out scenarios, looking for threats, trying to gain certainty in situations that are inherently uncertain. And the reason this is exhausting isn't just because it takes time, it's because it creates a false sense of productivity. Your mind feels like it's doing something important, like it's protecting you, like all this thinking is necessary. So you keep doing it, even though it never actually makes you feel better. Here's what's actually happening. Your nervous system perceives uncertainty as danger, not physical danger, psychological danger, the danger of being judged, of being rejected, of being misunderstood, of failing. And when your nervous system detects danger, it activates a response. In this case, the response isn't fight or flight, it's a thought. Your mind believes that if it can think through every angle, anticipate every outcome, prepare for every possibility, it can keep you safe. And this made sense at some point in your development. Maybe you grew up in an environment where being prepared actually did reduce harm, where anticipating problems gave you an advantage, where thinking ahead kept you out of trouble. But now that strategy has become automatic, and it's applying itself to situations where it's not needed. Your mind is treating a casual text message like a crisis that requires strategic planning. It's treating a simple decision like a high-stakes gamble. It's activating a full threat response for things that aren't actually threatening. This is hypervigilance at the cognitive level. Your mind is scanning constantly, looking for problems, preparing defenses, running simulations, and all of this happens so quickly that you don't even realize it's a choice. It just feels like the way your brain works, but it's not. It's a learned pattern, and learned patterns can be unlearned. There's a student who can't start assignments until the last minute, not because she's lazy, but because starting means confronting the possibility that she won't do it perfectly, so she thinks about it instead. She plans how she'll approach it, she imagines different structures, she researches tangentially related topics, she does everything except the actual work. And then when the deadline gets close enough that not starting is more dangerous than starting imperfectly, she finally begins. She works frantically, produces something good enough, and then immediately starts overthinking the next assignment. This is overthinking as avoidance. Her mind has convinced her that thinking about the work is safer than doing the work, because as long as she's still planning, she hasn't failed yet. The moment she starts, failure becomes possible. So her mind keeps her in the planning phase indefinitely. The psychology here is straightforward. Overthinking protects you from the discomfort of action. It gives you the illusion of progress without the risk of actual outcomes. It lets you feel like you're handling things while avoiding the vulnerability of trying. And this is why telling yourself to just stop overthinking doesn't work, because overthinking isn't the problem, it's the solution. It's your mind's way of managing anxiety. And until you address the underlying anxiety, the overthinking will continue. So what is the underlying anxiety? For most people, it's the fear of being wrong, of making a mistake, of looking foolish, of disappointing someone, of not being good enough. These aren't abstract fears. They're deeply embedded beliefs about what it means to be acceptable, lovable, worthy of belonging. Your mind learned somewhere that being right equals being safe, that mistake equals rejection, that uncertainty equals danger, and so it developed a strategy to minimize all of these risks. That strategy is constant overthinking. There's a man who can't let conversations end naturally. He has to send a follow-up text, something light, something that reframes the interaction in case the other person had any negative impression. He knows this is excessive. He knows people aren't analyzing the conversation the way he is, but the anxiety won't let him stop. It tells him that one more message will provide closure, will make everything okay, will prevent misunderstanding. And so he sends it and feels relief for about 5 minutes. And then he starts overthinking whether the follow-up text was necessary, whether it made things weird, whether he should have just left it alone. This is the trap of reassurance seeking through overthinking. Your mind tells you that more analysis will resolve the anxiety, but it doesn't. It just creates new things to analyze. The reason overthinking is so persistent is because it occasionally works. Sometimes you do think of something important. Sometimes your preparation does help. Sometimes analyzing a situation does reveal something useful. And those occasional successes reinforce the behavior. Your mind learns that overthinking is valuable, that it keeps you safe, that it's worth the energy cost. But here's what your mind misses. The cost is massive, and the benefit is minimal. You're spending hours of mental energy to gain insights you could have accessed in minutes if you weren't so tangled in the process. You're exhausting yourself to prevent outcomes that probably wouldn't happen anyway. This is the psychology of mental exhaustion. It's not about how much you're doing, it's about how much you're thinking about what you're doing. Your mind is running parallel processes constantly, the actual task and the meta-analysis of the task. Am I doing this right? What will people think? What if I made a mistake? Should I check again? And both processes require energy, but only one of them is productive. There's a woman who checks her work obsessively, not because she makes frequent mistakes, but because the possibility of a mistake feels intolerable. She reads emails 5 times before sending. She reviews documents repeatedly. She second-guesses decisions she already made, and every time she checks, she finds something tiny to adjust, which confirms her belief that checking is necessary, that without all this vigilance, she would fail. But she wouldn't. She's competent. Her first version is almost always fine. The checking isn't improving her work. It's just feeding the overthinking loop. It's reinforcing the belief that her natural judgment isn't trustworthy, that she needs to monitor everything or it will fall apart. This is how overthinking becomes self-perpetuating. It creates the very insecurity it claims to be solving. The more you check, the less you trust yourself. The less you trust yourself, the more you feel you need to check. And breaking this cycle requires you to do something counterintuitive. You have to stop trying to think your way out of it. Here's the shift. Overthinking happens because your mind is trying to answer questions that don't have definitive answers. Did I say the right thing? Do they like me? Did I make the best choice? What will happen tomorrow? These questions feel urgent, but they're unanswerable, and trying to answer them through more thinking is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. The alternative is to recognize the question as unanswerable and choose to move forward anyway, not because you've figured it out, but because waiting for certainty means never moving at all. This is internal control. You can't control what other people think. You can't control future outcomes. You can't control whether you made the perfect choice, but you can control whether you spend the next 3 hours trying to analyze your way to certainty. You practice this by noticing when the overthinking loop starts. You catch yourself replaying a conversation and you name it. I'm ruminating. This isn't solving anything. I'm going to let this go. And then you redirect, not to be distracted, but to something present. What are you doing right now? What do you see, hear, feel? You bring your mind back to the moment instead of letting it spiral into analysis. This feels impossible at first because your mind will insist that thinking is important, that you're missing something, that you need to figure this out before you can relax, but you don't, you never did. The thinking was just a way to avoid sitting with uncertainty. And uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. You can tolerate it without needing to analyze it away. There's a man who used to spend every evening replaying his workday, every meeting, every email, every interaction, looking for mistakes, building cases for why people probably thought he was incompetent. And then one evening, he tried something different. He noticed the loop starting and said out loud, "This isn't helping," and then he stopped. The urge to continue was intense. His mind screamed that he needed to finish the analysis, but he didn't. He sat with discomfort, and after a few minutes the urge passed. The thoughts were still there, but they were quieter, less demanding. He practiced this every evening, and slowly the pattern weakened. He still noticed the thoughts, but they no longer controlled him. He could let them be there without following them. This is how to stop overthinking, not by forcing your mind to be blank, but by recognizing the pattern and choosing not to engage it. The thoughts will come, you just don't have to do anything with them. You also practice trusting yourself. Every time you make a decision without overanalyzing it, you're teaching your mind that your natural judgment is sufficient. Every time you send a message without rereading it 5 times, you're proving that catastrophe doesn't follow imperfection. Every time you let a conversation end without a follow-up text, you're demonstrating that relationships survive without constant management. And each of these moments weakens the overthinking pattern because your mind learns through experience, and the experience of things being okay without excessive analysis is powerful. This doesn't mean you'll never overthink again, but it does mean overthinking stops being your default. It becomes something you notice and choose whether to engage, and that choice changes everything. Your mind isn't overthinking because you're broken. It's overthinking because it learned that thinking equals safety, and now you're teaching it something new. That safety doesn't require constant analysis. That uncertainty is tolerable. That you can trust yourself without needing to monitor everything. The psychology behind constant overthinking is simple. Your mind is trying to protect you. It's just using a strategy that doesn't work anymore. And understanding that lets you respond with compassion instead of frustration. Your mind isn't your enemy. It's just operating with outdated programming, and that programming can be updated, one moment of letting go at a time. Subscribe to The Anxious Mind to understand your anxiety without shame and train a calmer mind. Like this video if you want clarity without judgment. What's one thing you overthink that you know doesn't need this much analysis? Leave it in the comments. And if this resonated, the next video will show you why your mind won't let you rest even when you're exhausted. Thank you for being here. You're not alone in this.